There is a specific time of the day when your mental energy is the highest. This is when you should be doing deep work. This is when you should be thinking critically, strategizing, doing high energy tasks. But if you're checking email, doing job site visits, driving around, doing windshield time, doing low-level tasks, and then you're trying to do these tasks that require high mental energy the wrong time of the day, you're just not going to get them done, or you're not going to get them done very well. You need to figure out when is your peak mental energy time, and then match your activities with your mental energy. Hey guys, Todd, Dawalt here from constructionleadingedge.com, and we're going to talk about 5 things that successful entrepreneurs manage that nobody told you about. Nobody told me this in school when I was studying engineering and construction management. Nobody talks about this stuff in school, so there are 5 things that successful entrepreneurs manage that nobody told you about. We're going to talk about that. So when I was in school, I was taught you manage a handful of things. In construction management, you're managing time, you're managing money or capital, managing labor, people in the job site, in the trailer, in the office. You're managing material, the flow of material, equipment, information, technology. But there are 5 things that you have to manage if you want to be a successful entrepreneur that you probably didn't learn about. We're going to talk about that in this episode. I have a quick announcement for you before we get into that. Registration is open for the Advance Live Meetup. The theme is get out of day-to-day firefighting and become the CEO of your business. This live meetup is March 30th and 31st in Austin, Texas. These events are the best thing I can do for you if you are a construction business owner. Topics will include how you can get out of day-to-day firefighting and get your business to run without you. Clearly defining roles and responsibilities for your team, how to delegate results, how you can attract and retain top employees and become the employer of choice in your market, how to turn business profits into long-term wealth, some systems and power laws you can install to make your business run without you, and more profitably without you. There will be deep work sessions with a small group of other construction business owners just like you. There'll be networking with like-minded builders and remodelers and general contractors. This is the best thing I can do for you to help you get out of your business for a couple of days, work on your business from the 30,000-foot level, and be surrounded by a bunch of other people just like you. So space is very limited. Seats will go very quickly. You can go to constructionleadingedge.com/advance, ADVANCE, see if seats are still available, and grab yours. Okay, let's get to these 5 things that successful entrepreneurs manage that nobody told you about. Number 1, nobody told me in college that I would need to manage my fears. But I can tell you, after being an entrepreneur for several years, coaching and training and mentoring entrepreneurs for several years, talking to hundreds of people, one of the biggest things that entrepreneurs need to manage to be successful is fear. Fears like imposter syndrome, which is this low-lying, latent fear that at some point somebody's going to walk into your office, point their finger at you and say, you are a fraud. You have no idea what you're doing. You don't belong here. You don't deserve to own a business. Why the hell would anybody work with you? Why would anybody hire you to do work? Imposter syndrome. That's a big one. Very, very prevalent. Here's an interesting threat. An interesting fear is this fear that really it boils down to the idea that new employees are a threat. We had a live meetup and talked about how do we retain top employees? How do we attract and retain top employees? And very quickly, it became apparent that the number one thing that's holding small construction business owners back from recruiting and hiring people, really top quality talent, is this fear. Well, what if I hire this person and they become a competitor? What if I hire them and they come in and they look in my books and then they point out that I'm a fraud? They sort of do that imposter syndrome thing. What if they What if I hire someone and they mess up the culture of my company? What if they mess up my relationship with customers? What if? Fears that basically can be boiled down to new employees are a threat. And if you are afraid of new employees, you'll probably never hire them. So you've got to get that one under control. Fears of what if I make a mistake and hire the wrong person? What if I don't do a good job? What if my decision-making isn't good? What if I don't have the chops or I don't have what it takes to lead a team of A players? What if I hire someone and they're better than me? What if they're smarter than me? What if they're a better project manager, a better estimator? What if they're better at customers? What if my customers like them better than me? What if my team follows them better than they follow me? What if my superintendents go to them, this new person with my problems or with their problems? It's going to hurt my ego. These are fears that will hold you back from ever hiring people. And then what if I try to grow my business and I fail? What if I try? What if I give it everything I have and I just come up short? That is a big fear. There are all sorts of other fears, but let's talk about what happens if you don't manage your fears. If you don't manage your fears, you're just going to be anxious and fearful all the time. We'll talk about some of the things, some really specific things that will happen in item number 2 in just a moment. But if you don't manage your fear, you will be anxious all the time. You'll be miserable. You will never be able to enjoy wins, never be able to celebrate victory because you're always afraid of the other shoe dropping. Yeah, this went okay, but something bad's about to happen. You're always fearful of something bad happening, so you'll really struggle to celebrate wins. And more than likely, if you don't manage your fears, you'll just never try. You will never try. If you're afraid of employees, if you see new employees as a threat, you'll never go out and recruit them. Or if you do recruit them, you'll never hire them because deep down you see them as a threat. You'll come up with all sorts of rationalizations why it wasn't going to work anyway, why it wasn't a good fit, and you'll just never try and you'll stay stuck exactly where you are. The number 2 thing that successful entrepreneurs manage that nobody told you about, unless you took some pretty high-level psychology classes, is your inner critic. This is a fascinating topic to me, and this inner critic is something we all have, and I believe it causes so many people to be stuck and then ultimately get to the end of their career or the end of their life and have just a stack of regrets. So I'll read a couple of excerpts from psychologists about the inner critic. Here we go. Our inner critic can be a cruel and deeply damaging force. Its strength and impact determine our overall mental well-being. The destructive voice in our heads is never satisfied and can soil and spoil anything we may achieve, no matter how impressive. A more scientific explanation of the origins of the inner critic locates it in particular parts of our brains. More specifically, scientists have argued that we have a primitive, quote, survivor brain, or some people call it the lizard brain or the reptilian brain, that encompasses the brainstem, the older part of our brain that is tasked with physical survival, and it's where the fight or flight response to danger lives. This part of our brains is highly attuned to danger. The inner critic may say things like, quote, you're a big fat loser and you'll never achieve anything in your life. It may say, quote, nobody likes you. You don't have any friends. The inner critic also has the power to make us feel constantly anxious, hypervigilant. It may incessantly spot and point out danger, both to our physical and psychological health. It may catastrophize, split, exaggerate, and magnify the bad and minimize the good in our lives. It may engage in paranoid mind reading. Let's pause and reflect on that. It may engage in paranoid mind reading, attributing bad motives to other people's words and actions. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Another researcher put it this way when talking about the inner critic. It may live in constant expectation of punishment and falling from grace and fixate on signs of lost love and affection in our interactions with others, hypersensitively attuned to danger signals, and with a relentless focus on what could go wrong. It may instill in us chronic anxiety. Interestingly, various studies have investigated links between anxiety and strong inner critical voices. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? It may constantly draw attention to our perceived faults and shortcomings. It may tell us we're stupid, we're ugly, we're deeply flawed, and unlovable at our core. It may belittle our achievements, dismissing them as luck, mistakes, or accidents. Has that ever happened? Have you ever had a success and then this voice in your head said, yeah, that was luck, or it was a mistake, or it was just an accident? Even a blind dog finds a bone every once in a while, right? Your inner critic may be contemptuous, arrogant, or even hateful. It may badger us for past mistakes or paralyze us with disparaging marks in the present. It is the reason for our regrets, anger, anxiety, guilt, and shame. Think about that. It may badger us for past mistakes. Have you ever made a mistake? And you could probably think of a few mistakes that really sting right now. I certainly have a long string of mistakes, and my inner critic has a really good memory, and it likes to remind me of those things a lot. Hypervigilant. It is constantly on the lookout for threats. It relentlessly compares and contrasts and finds us wanting. It also involves the limbic system and the amygdala, which regulate our emotional responses and can trigger the emission of the stress hormone cortisol. Originally, our inner critic had a positive function to ensure our survival. This includes not just spotting danger in our environment, but also inner work in the form of psychological sense-making. So this inner critic lives in your brainstem, in the amygdala. It's where the fight or flight response lives. It's constantly looking for bad things. Have you noticed that? Maybe you've noticed this in other people. Maybe you've noticed it in yourself. You're constantly looking for bad things, constantly dwelling on mistakes, exaggerating mistakes, minimizing positive things. So a couple of examples, what the inner critic might sound like. Maybe you send out an email that had a typo in it. You realize it, and then somebody points out that typo, and then you feel it. You're like, oh, shit, I can't believe I did that. And then weeks later, your inner critic said, yeah, Todd, remember that email you sent out that had a typo? Yeah, maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should never do that again. You know, a good explanation, a very short explanation I heard for the inner critic is that the inner critic's job is to protect us from the shame of failure. It's trying to protect us from the shame of failure. So it'll do whatever it can to try to protect us from the shame of failure. Usually, its best strategy is to convince you not to do anything that might possibly lead to the shame of failure. Another example of what the inner critic does, it will cause you to jump to conclusions. Some people, I've been around some people, and maybe you've seen this as well, but their hamstrings and their leg muscles must be so incredibly strong because they can jump to conclusions like nobody else. They can read between the lines. There can be little bits of information, and they can put together this fantastic story of what's going on. That's what the inner critic does. It also, typically those stories involve attributing bad motives to other people's words and actions. Think about this. Think about when that customer calls. You look at your phone and you see it's them. Like, it's them. And in about 0.8 seconds, you already know what it's about. You know what's going to happen. You know what they're going to say. And you have already failed. They've fired you. And you're homeless, living under a bridge. And that happens in about 0.8 seconds. Before you can even answer the phone. That's the inner critic. Assigning and attributing bad motives to other people's words and actions. Filling in the gaps, jumping to conclusions, lots of negative speculation. Think about this. Maybe someone on your team has been a little preoccupied lately. Maybe they've been out of the office a little bit more than usual. They're on the phone. They seem distracted. And in your mind, the only logical conclusion is they're about to quit and they're going to go work for your competitor, or they're going to start a business and compete with you, or something bad is going on, right? That's the inner critic. I saw this a lot. I saw a lot of inner critic, a lot of catastrophization and speculation over the past 3 years. When COVID hit, I saw lots of this, a lot of people saying the construction industry is over. It's going to come to a screeching halt. The economy is we're just going to crumble. The world is going to end. We might as well just pack it up. And somehow we survived that. And then the lumber prices spiked. Same thing. The housing industry is dead. Construction's going to die. The construction industry is going to come to a screeching halt. We're all done for. The economy's over. We're back to 2008. Another great financial crisis 2.0. We survived that. Lumber prices spiked again. The same people said the same thing. Then interest rates spiked. And here we are in early 2023. Interest rates spiked in the last 6 months. Same thing. It's Chicken Little. The sky is falling. Bad things are happening because the inner critic is always scanning the horizon, hyper vigilant, looking for threats, always looking for something bad that's going to happen. So here's what's going to happen if you don't manage your inner critic. Okay, this is not something where you can just coexist with your inner critic, because I've seen this with anxiety and depression. Either you're winning or it's winning. You have to actively push this thing back, or it will actively take you over. It's not something you can just coexist in peaceful harmony with. You have to actively and proactively push and take this thing back, and make sure you're not feeding. You need to starve the inner critic. So here's what happens if you don't manage your inner critic. You'll be stuck in the paralysis of analysis. If you have an idea, you will be paralyzed, analyzing the options, thinking about all the bad things that can happen, and you probably just won't try. The inner critic says it's better not to try than risk the shame of failure. And probably one of the biggest risks of the inner critic is that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The inner critic leads to a lot of self-fulfilling prophecies. There's a line in one of my favorite books, Think and Grow Rich, that says, our thoughts tend to clothe themselves in reality. Your thoughts tend to clothe themselves in reality. Whatever you focus on, you're going to get more of in your life. So if your inner critic is managing you, then you're going to get negativity. You're going to get bad things. You're going to fail. But if you manage your inner critic and push it down, focus on the positive, then you'll get more of those things. Whatever you think about, whatever you focus on, you're going to get more of. All right, number 3 thing that you need to manage that maybe nobody told you about. Certainly nobody told me about this, and I wish I had learned it a couple of decades sooner, is your mental energy. You need to manage your mental energy because, let's face it, you only have so much mental energy in a day. I'm not talking about physical energy. I'm talking about mental energy. And there are a lot of things that you could be doing to ruin your energy. For example, wasting your peak mental energy hours. A lot of you are wasting your peak mental energy hours. You're doing low-level, low-energy tasks like responding to email or scrolling through social media during peak mental energy hours. There is a specific time of the day when your mental energy is the highest. This is when you should be doing deep work. This is when you should be thinking critically, strategizing, doing high-energy tasks. But if you're checking email, doing job site visits, driving around, doing windshield time, doing low-level tasks, and then you're trying to do these tasks that require high mental energy the wrong time of the day, you're just not going to get them done, or you're not going to get them done very well. You need to figure out when is your peak mental energy time and then match your activities with your mental energy. For most of the people I talk to, peak mental energy time is in the morning. That's when you need to be doing your deep work. It's what we call your CEO schedule time, doing the things that will really move the needle. And then in the off-peak mental energy times, that's when you need to be doing the lower level tasks that don't require lots of mental energy. One thing that is likely killing your mental energy, one thing that has cost me probably hundreds of thousands of dollars over my career, I wish somebody had told me about, is what I ate for lunch. What I ate for lunch. It's very possible that what you're eating for lunch is absolutely hammering your bottom line. If you're following what I call the Captain Carbohydrate diet, it could be costing you 6 figures or so a year because it's just hammering your energy. If you're eating a lot of carbs, a lot of bread, a lot of pizza, pasta, fast food, if you're hammering your body, forcing it to digest garbage, basically, it's going to require a lot of energy. Your body has to work really hard to digest that food, and it puts you into what I've seen some people call the afternoon doldrums. So if you feel this lack of energy and you just can't stay awake, or if you feel like you have to prop your head up and take a nap in such a way that nobody can see you, like I had to do. I remember doing that back when I was stuck in an estimating department. To make it through the day, I had to actually take a 10 or 15 minute nap in the afternoon. If you find that, you need to look at what you're eating because it could be killing your energy. So your mental energy is something you need to manage. And then number 4 is your emotions. Chances are nobody ever told you how important it is to manage your emotional state. Your emotional state affects a lot of things. If you're an entrepreneur, your emotional state can make or break you. It will affect your ability to sell. Your emotional state will affect your ability to lead your team. Your emotional state will affect your ability to plan and strategize, to manage finances. It will certainly affect your ability to deal with problems. So think about this. Assume that you're frustrated, you're in a low emotional state, you're depressed, frustrated, your inner critic is just running the show, talking about bad things are going to happen. Dude, this thing's spiraling. We're spiraling the drain. We're in the spiral of death here. Something bad's about to happen. The sky is falling. Think about that. If that's your state, how are you going to sell? How are you going to show up when you're talking to prospective clients? How are you going to show up for your team when you're trying to lead them? How's that going to affect your ability to plan and strategize for the future? And how will you deal with problems, right? Chances are you'll be like, well, we're talking about the ship's going down here, so why rearrange chairs on the Titanic when it's going down? So your ability to manage your emotional state affects your ability to lead, to sell, to strategize, to manage your finances, and solve problems in your business. And then the 5th thing, this may surprise you, the 5th thing you need to manage is your strengths. Okay, most people will tell you you need to manage your weaknesses, identify your weaknesses, try to prop them up, focus on your weaknesses, and focus on managing your weaknesses and amplifying your strengths. But I'm telling you, you need to manage your strengths because your strengths can get you in more trouble than your weaknesses. Let me say that again. Your strengths can get you into more trouble than your weaknesses. There was a fascinating study called Why Large Contractors Fail. It was put together by the FMI Corp. And here's what they said. They studied why large contractors failed, why successful contractors who seemed to be too successful and too large to fail, why they actually went bankrupt. And they said another root cause of poor decision-making is the leader who exhibits an excessive ego. Extremely confident and often unwilling to listen to the opinions and suggestions of others, this person can literally take down the entire company. In order to be a successful contractor, you must have self-confidence and a high tolerance for risk. Contractors must also possess a high degree of optimism, or they would have a difficult time winning any bids and securing work. So these are strengths, right? Strengths, in order to get to a certain point, owning a construction business, you have to have a high degree of optimism, a high tolerance for risk, and high self-confidence. Those are strengths, right? But this study said the key is to avoid carrying that optimism and risk tolerance to the extreme, a scenario that can lead to bad business decisions and ultimately company failure. There are many examples of construction firms that have run into financial problems due to the leader's hubris and perception of being invincible. Let me say that again. Some of you need to hear this. Some of you are on this track right now. There are many examples of construction firms that have run into financial problems due to the leader's hubris and perception of being invincible. Sometimes this is referred to as, quote, driving the business off a cliff at 100 miles per hour, end quote. Self-destruction at its worst. Strengths, when not managed properly, can be a huge liability. That's why it's important to manage those strengths. Okay, so to recap, 5 things successful entrepreneurs manage that maybe nobody told you about. Number 1, your fears. You've got to manage your inner critic. Number 2. Number 3, your mental energy. Especially watch what you're eating. What are the things that are affecting your mental energy? Number 4, your emotions. And number 5, manage your strengths. Be sure that you are not the person who drives the business off a cliff at 100 miles per hour. Do not be the reason that your business self-destructs. All right, well, the fastest way to get these things under control and managed properly, we found, is to get into a community of people that are all working on the same stuff every single day. And that's what we have here at Construction Leading Edge. We have this incredible program where we work with you to systematize your construction business like we've done with many of our other clients. We'll begin to work on your mindset along the way. And one of the most amazing things about it is that for a lot of our clients, not only is their business and their bank account and their daily schedule radically different, but they are also radically different. They have more confidence, more peace of mind. They're less anxious. They sleep better at night. They're a better leader for their team. They're more present at home for their family. And they have no problem charging a premium price for their work, about being selective about who they work with. So if that's what you want, if you want those things, if you want to manage these things that we've talked about today, then I want to invite you to book a call to speak with us. Go to constructionleadingedge.com/apply. That's APPLY. Then book an appointment to speak to us. We'll get on the phone for 45 minutes or so. Then you can tell us everything that's working in your business, everything that's not working in your business, and we'll put our heads together and we'll come up with a step-by-step game plan to get you exactly where you want to go. We'll talk about the real root cause of your biggest and most painful problems, the crucial systems that will help you solve those root causes, but also what needs to change in your mindset to get where you want to go. And if you want our help to do that, we can talk about that too. If not, that's fine too. Either way, our goal is to give you massive value. So go to constructionleadingedge.com/apply, APPLY. Book that appointment to speak to us. It's absolutely free, and it will be the best 45 minutes you've spent working on your business in a long time. I promise you. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Todd Dawalt from constructionleadingedge.com. We'll talk soon.